Buried deep in the midst of the PlayStation 2 generation, when games were expanding boundaries and testing new grounds for interactive storytelling, a tiny crew at Sony Computer Entertainment was working quietly on something remarkable. Something that would move beyond the medium itself and challenge us to redefine what games could do, what they could tell, and how they could make us feel. This was Ico, a cult classic, an art touchstone, and, most notably, a tribute to the potency of minimalism in a business that so very often is consumed by excess. What you are about to read is less a retelling of what transpired than it is a walk through one of gaming's most lovely and haunting stories. We'll uncover all the crevices of the castle, each shadow that is hidden in its abysses, each instant of bonding between two souls stuck in an establishment where hope itself appears to have expired a long time ago. This is the entire tale of Ico, a story of horns and cages, light and shadow, a boy and a girl who speak foreign languages but are perfectly understood by each other. The world outside the castle. Let us not start in the castle itself, but in the world outside its worn walls. Somewhere, on some far shore, isolated from the rest of civilization, by great distances of ocean and time, there is a village. It is a village of plain folk leading plain lives, their days counted by the sun's rise and fall, their years measured by the changing of seasons. But this village bears a curse, an old burden transmitted over time, like a weighty stone that does not grow lighter with age. The curse takes the most innocent of forms, children born with horns, not mythological or fantastical decorative horns, but actual, physical growths of bone that protrude from the side of a child's head, similar to the horns of a young bull. In this village, such children are not regarded as special or remarkable. They are blamed, they are feared, they are regarded as omens of ill fortune, bearers of disaster who will cause devastation to their families, and devastation to their community if permitted to exist among them. The superstition is deep-seated, entrenched in the village's culture like threads in old fabric. When crops wither, when disease rages, when hurricanes hammer the shore or fish flee the seas, the villagers blame the horned children and know the cause of their woes. It does not matter that they are innocent, that they laugh and play and dream like any other child. It does not matter that they weep when wounded or beam when joyful. The point is the fear, and fear monsterizes us all. So the village has created a ritual, an awful practice out of desperation and nurtured by habit. When a child is a certain age, say about 12 or 13 summers, he is taken from home. 3 men, faces covered behind ritual masks, come on horseback. They say nothing, they offer no explanation. They just seize the child, tie their hands and carry them off while the family stands at doors and windows, alternate between sorrow and relief, between love and survival. The destination is always the same, a castle that emerges above the mist-covered cliffs at the world's end. It is where legends are born, a building so old no one can recall who constructed it or when. It perches on 4 great islands of stone, linked by decaying bridges and walkways, as if the earth itself refused it and attempted to sunder it. The castle is vast, unimaginably so. Its spires reaching skywards like clutching fingers, its walls broad enough to contain armies that have passed into legend. It is lovely in the way that ruins are lovely, in the way that decay can be poetry inscribed in stone and silence. Down in the bottom of this castle, in rooms that have not felt the touch of sun in centuries, are tombs. They are stone sarcophagi in rows, each one precisely the right size to encase a tiny body, each one ornamented with the shape of horns upon the lid. These are the final resting grounds of the horned children, their prison cells and their graves. The masked men take each fresh sacrifice to an abandoned tomb, put them within and seal it up with locks from times past and with heavy stone. Then they depart, back to the village to wait for the next child, the next sacrifice, the next try at appeasing whatever power craves this horrific cost. The children die alone in the darkness, scared and neglected, their wails going unheard by anyone who would care. They wither away from hunger or choke from asphyxiation or just lose the will to go on, their little hands slowly coming to rest against the chill stone. And the castle receives them, joins them into its repository of little tragedies and patiently awaits the next installment. This is how things have been for generations, maybe centuries. The horned children arrive and the horned children perish and the world goes on as though they had never existed at all. But on one fateful day, when the mist clung particularly heavily about the foundations of the castle and the sea boiled with unseasonable ferocity, something untoward occurred, something that would alter everything. The awakening our tale properly starts with a boy who is called Ico. 12 years old by some reports, 13 by others. But age is of little consequence when compared to eternity. What is significant is that Ico is the newest in a succession of horned children, born with the mark of the curse that his village dreads so intensely. He has lived his whole life expecting that day to come, expecting the masked men to finally arrive for him, expecting his destiny to be sealed the day that first horns appeared in his head. The ride to the castle is long and quiet. Iko rides a horse, his hands tied, his mind filled with things he cannot say out loud. Does he ask himself what will become of him? Does he think about his family, his friends, the life he is abandoning? Does he seethe with anger over the injustice of being made to suffer for something that is outside his control? We never know. The game, being minimal as ever, only presents us with the necessities: a little boy, 3 masked figures, and a castle that grows larger by the second until it fills the entire world. They move through corridors that appear to be designed to confuse, to remove any notion of direction or possibility of escape. The building itself is sinister, not so much in an obvious sense, but in how utterly uncaring it is about human comfort or sense. Stairs go nowhere. Rooms are joined in ways that defy geometric sense. The entire building is like a maze from the mind of a person who would realize that the worst prisons are not those with locked doors, but those where every hallway is a return to despair. And finally, they arrive at the Chamber of Tombs. It is a coiled, round room, spiraling up into blackness, walls filled with hundreds of stone sarcophagi. Each represents a silent witness to a child who lived before, a life cut short before it had really started. The masked figures open an empty tomb, insert ICO, and close it again. The lock clicks into place, echoing through the room like a death knell. And then they withdraw, their footsteps dying into silence, and ICO is left in darkness. ICO lies for an instant, perhaps for countless instants, unmoving in his prison of stone. The air is heavy. The walls close in. This is death, and slow death, and there is nothing to be done about it. But then something marvelous occurs, something the men in masks would never have been able to foresee. The castle, which is old and crumbling, finally yields to its own deterioration. A shudder courses through the building, savage enough to dislodge centuries of built-up damage. Stone creaks against stone. Somewhere down in the earth, something gives way, and ICO's coffin, precariously balanced on its ledge far out over the floor, slips from its vertiginous perch. The descent is short but savage. The stone coffin falls through the air and lands on the floor below with a splintering crash. The lid shatters. The walls split asunder, and ICO, battered and confused but very much alive, is suddenly free in a manner he would never have anticipated. He is able to drag himself from the rubble of his tomb, his legs unstable, his head reeling with what has occurred. Around him, the rest of the sarcophagi are sealed, their owners long dead or dying, their agony going on in darkness, but he is the only one who has been given this impossible stay of execution. ICO does not feel fortunate. Not yet. For he is still being kept in this castle, still being surrounded by the tombs of children who suffered like him, still being alone in a place that seems to be made to snuff out hope itself. He sets about discovering his prison, creeping cautiously through gloomy chambers, his little hands grasping for holds on worn stone as he makes his way upward toward the light that comes down from somewhere far, far away. And it is here in this discovery that ICO has something odd, a vision of sorts, or a dream, although he knows he is awake. He thinks of a cage, hung from chains between the walls of a tower so high its summit is out of sight. In the cage, shadows collect and trickle like fluid darkness, descending to the ground below. The vision is horrifying and compelling in equal proportion, searing itself into ICO's brain with the force of prophecy. And then he comes awake fully, knowing that he had actually been unconscious for a few seconds, that the fall was more of a shock than he at first realized. He dispels the residual fear from the dream and presses on in his search, motivated by the raw animal imperative to escape, to survive, to live one additional day even if he doesn't yet know for what reason. The castle uncovers itself gradually, each fresh room a revelation of impossibility of structure. There are chambers so great that ICO's footsteps can be heard for seconds before they reach silence. There are bridges that cross abysses so profound that the depth is obscured in darkness. There are devices which still work after centuries of abandonment, gears and chains and weights clicking into action with mechanical inevitability when ICO inadvertently triggers them. The location is a testament to ambition, to workmanship, to a people who constructed for the ages and then disappeared, leaving just stone and silence. But the most compelling aspect of the castle is not its size or its complexity, nor even its ruin, it is the light. The castle is constructed so that sunlight seeps into almost every room, filtered by stone grills and bounced off weathered surfaces, casting patterns of light that are almost entirely complete in their loveliness. The light appears to lead ICO forward, attracting him to brighter rooms, to windows that gaze out over seemingly infinite ocean, to the promise of an outside world that lies beyond here. It is the light that ultimately brings him to the tower, to the room where his dream comes to pass, Yorda in the cage. At the top of the eastern tower, in a room bathed in pillars of light that stream down like spotlights on a stage, ICO learns that his vision was not a dream. There, hanging from chains hooked into the vaulted ceiling, is a cage. It is crafted from metal that has never rusted after all the centuries, hammered out with such skill that not so much as a small gap remains between its bars. And inside that cage, seated with the resignation of one who has long since abandoned hope of freedom, is a girl. She is so ethereal that ICO wonders if she is actually real. Her skin is white, nearly translucent in the sunlight, as though she is constructed of moonlight-given shape. Her hair is cropped an unfashionable bleached wheat color that speaks of sun-beaten summers without end. She wears a plain white dress, begrimed by time and circumstance, but still somehow unsoiled. And when she realizes ICO's gaze is fixed on her, she does not shout or shriek for aid. She just stands, goes over the bars of her cage and gazes down on him with eyes filled with more sorrow than any child should ever have to see. ICO knows at once, with the wordless instinct that knows him, that this girl is a captive, just as he was destined to be. He does not know who she is or how she has come here, or what offense she must have committed to end up with such a destiny. He only knows that she is captive, and that he, by a miracle, is not. And in that instant, a resolution begins in his youthful mind, unfaltering and elementary. He will set her free. The endeavor is more straightforward than he had anticipated. The machinery governing the cage, as all else in the castle, is old but operative. ICO discovers levers and toggles, pulls on chains and turns spindles, his tiny form scrambling across outcroppings and through openings that were obviously not intended for rescue. And inch by inch, against all possibility, the cage starts moving downward. The chains creak and jingle. The girl stands by, whether in hope or incredulity. And when the cage at last hits the floor, thudding with a dull metallic crash that resonates through the chamber, ICO darts forward to finish his act of mercy. The door to the cage swings open all too easily, as if it was never intended to contain forever, but only to contain for a long while. And the girl emerges, unencumbered at last after what must be years, perhaps even more. She stands tall, taller than ICO. Her willowy figure and slender build, for all the evident frailty from having been in prison. She takes in the room as if beholding it for the very first time, or if beholding it with fresh eyes, now that she is free to do so. And then she glances at ICO. A moment of mutual acknowledgement, not of faces but of situations. They are both kids in a land that consumes kids. They are both touched by forces that are outside of their control. They are both alive in a land created for death. And in that instant, something arises between them, something that will be the center of everything that comes thereafter. ICO extends his hand to her, an act as ancient as man himself, an invitation of bond in a land of solitude. The girl regards his outstretched hand for an extended amount of time, and then she grasps it. Her fingers are icy, her hold unfirm, but she does, and ICO, saying nothing, starts to guide her away from the cage, away from the tower, to whatever freedom there may be outside the walls of the castle. This is when they find the first obstacle to what ICO had thought would be an easy escape. The girl has no ability to speak his language, and he has no way of speaking hers. The language barrier: when ICO speaks, his words come in a language that is somewhat recognizable to players who may identify Japanese phonetics, although the words themselves are jumbled, made alien, converted into something that is only present within the game world. The girl retaliates in kind, her voice low and melodious but completely indecipherable, constructing sounds and syllables that could be French or could be Latin or could be anything. Subsequent analysis would uncover the fact that her language was constructed by taking Japanese sentences, transcribing them into English letters, turning them around and then adulterating them further, creating something that sounds linguistic, but is resplendently other. For those who are playing the game as it was meant to be, without any translation given for Yorda's dialogue, this language barrier is central to the experience. We're put in the position of ICO, not being able to hear this girl we're attempting to rescue, having to fall back upon tone and posture, and context to make an educated guess at meaning. It is a nice frustration and a beautiful thing, a reminder that there is communication outside of words. That comprehension can result from common experience, even when words betray. The name of the girl we finally know from context and repetition is Yorda. We find that out not by explicit presentation, but through how she points to herself when ICO is uncertain, through how her name fills in the gaps in the game's interface, when specific actions must be taken. It is characteristic of the game's narrative style. Show don't tell. Trust the player to learn by seeing, not by telling. As ICO guides Yorda through the castle, a number of things become immediately clear. First, she's physically frail, her movements slow and tentative, as if her extended captivity has weakened her body and wounded her soul. She can't run, can't climb, can't jump over even small distances. She is, in terms of gaming, a burden, a character meant to make everything harder, every puzzle more confusing. But she is not always a burden, she is also an individual, and the game never allows us to forget that. Second, Yorda has powers that ICO does not, as they near certain doors all throughout the castle, mysterious gates scored with runes and pulsing with an unearthly energy. Yorda's presence alone causes them to open. Light streams from her in such instances, a white soft light that powers the mechanism and allows through. Without her, ICO would never be able to get past the initial chambers. With her, the whole castle is open to them. They require one another, and the design of the game makes sure that everyone is always aware of this basic fact. Third, and most darkly, are there forces within the castle who desire Yorda to return. The shadows materialize. The first time shadows manifest themselves, it is by surprise. ICO and Yorda are navigating through one of the castle's numerous courtyards, the sun beating down on their faces, the crash of waves off far-off cliffs on the breeze. It is nearly serene, nearly sufficient to cause one to forget that they are in prison. And then the earth starts to undulate, dark spots like oil bubbling up through cracks in the rock. The shadows emerge from these spots, taking on forms that are nearly human but fundamentally wrong. They are smoke and darkness creatures, their bodies twisting and unsteady, their eyes burning with a cold blue-white light that appears to view without compassion. Some of them are bipedal, standing on spindly legs like bony parodies of men. Others are winged, leathery appendages that enable them to float through the air. Others move in many limbs like insects blown up to monstrous proportions. But they all have one thing in common: horns. Their dark heads have small, almost imperceptible bumps for horns, but there is no doubt that they are there. These beings, whatever they are, were once ICO. They were once horned children that were taken to this castle to be killed. And now they do the bidding of whatever evil power holds sway over this place, corrupted into what is barely human. The shadows move with purpose. They disregard ICO entirely, their sights fixed on Yorda. They extend unreal hands, attempting to seize her, to pull her towards the dark gateways through which they came. And if they can do so, if they are able to pull her entirely inside one of those wells of darkness, the world itself appears to spurn it. A burst of shadow erupts outward, and ICO is frozen in stone where he stands. His body, caught in mid-movement, formed into a statue of defeat. Game over, start again, but ICO doesn't quit. He can't. He's traveled too far, and Yorda has already suffered too much. So he battles, clenching whatever object will serve as a weapon. A length of wood, old and sturdy. A piece of pipe, rusty but usable. Later, when he explores further into the castle's mysteries, a sword that sparks with otherworldly energy, its blade appearing to be crafted from solidified light. Armed with these improvised weapons, ICO fights the shadows, learning through frantic experimentation that they can be repelled, scattered, their forms shattering under continued assault. The fighting in ICO is intentionally uncomplicated, almost barbaric. This is not a game of learning intricate combat systems or executing dazzling combos. This is a game of a frightened child doing whatever he must do to save someone who can't save himself. Each whack of ICO's sword is weighty, clumsy, desperate. He is not a hero. He is nothing but a boy who won't relinquish a girl's hand, even when darkness itself calls for him to do so. And that hand-holding, that mere fact of physical contact, is made the mechanical and emotional hub of the whole thing. With a touch of a button, ICO can grasp Yorda's hand. Holding hands, he can guide her along, drag her behind, push her through obstacles. But more than that, the hand-holding is a vow, a declaration that announces, "I will not leave you. I will not allow them to take you. We will leave this place together or never." The darkness surfaces again and again as ICO and Yorda make their way through the castle. They stand up from the floors, fall from ceilings, materialize in dark recesses. They are persistent, but never in sufficient numbers to be overwhelming, their presence more a matter of generating tension than offering challenge. The actual challenge lies in working within Yorda's limitations, in uncovering paths she can take, in solving the environmental problems that stand in their way forward. These problems are masterpieces of integrated design. There are no colored buttons or obviously interactive objects. There are no more than levers that could be operating remote mechanisms, crates that could be placed to form stairs, chains that could bear the weight of ICO if he swings from them. The answers come through observation, invention, and more often than not, splitting up, with ICO exploring areas Yorda cannot to trigger mechanisms that open up routes for her to pass through. And throughout, there is the nagging sense that Yorda is vulnerable, that to leave her alone for any extended period will call up a special shadow created solely to entrap her should ICO not be present to stop it. This instills a rhythm in the gameplay, a push and pull between exploration and guard duty, between puzzle solving and hovering. It is tense in the manner that nursing someone is tense, in the manner that obligation presses on the heart. But there are quieter moments too in which ICO and Yorda sit upon stone benches that are placed here and there in the castle. These benches are save points, sites where one can mark progress, but they are better than mechanical conveniences. They are peace moments, fleeting pauses in the endless struggle where the two children can sit side by side and be without fear. The camera withdraws during these moments, presenting them side by side, two small bodies in an immense structure, taking comfort in proximity even when language fails them. These moments are important because they remind us that this is not a journey of flight alone. It is about friendship, about two individuals stumbling into each other in the loneliest of places and concluding that together they might make it through what alone would kill them. When ICO takes Yorda's hand, when he assists her across an expanse or rescues her from a ledge, when he stands between her and the darkness, he is deciding. He can run, he can attempt to flee by himself, but he doesn't. He remains, he guards, he guides. And gradually, unimaginably, Yorda comes to trust him. The design of captivity. To comprehend ICO's narrative fully, we need to comprehend the castle itself, because it is every bit a character as ICO or Yorda, every bit a presence as the shadows or the queen. The castle in the mist, by another name, is a building that refuses to be easily classified. It is fortress and prison, palace and tomb, monument and ruin, all at the same time. Its architecture cries out of bygone ages, of civilizations that have been risen and fallen, leaving nothing but stone witness to their hubris. The castle spans 4 rock islands that tower above the boiling sea like the forefingers of a dying giant. The islands are joined by bridges and tunnels, some hewn straight out of the solid stone. Others constructed over rickety spans that have lasted centuries, defying salt air erosion and the passage of time. The inner island contains the majority of the building, a labyrinth of halls and courtyards, gardens run wild and rooms with dust. East of the island is the tower in which Yorda was trapped. Spindly and high, its summit hidden in the ever-present mist that lends the castle its title. To the west lies a convoluted complex of arenas and corridors, buildings that suggest purposes long past. And to the north, cut off from the rest by the most dangerous paths, is the throne room and tomb chamber where ICO's odyssey started. What's really great about the castle is not its enormity, although it is huge, but how coherent it is. This is no hodgepodge of areas glued together by game designers. It's a real feeling place, one that uses its own internal rules, even if those rules are incomprehensible to contemporary thinking. From one spot, you can frequently look out and see other places you've been to or are going to, and there's a sense of place that is difficult to find in video games. The castle stands as a whole thing, every room linked to every other room, in ways that are spatially logical even when they are inconvenient. The building itself is narrative. In the great halls, one catches glimpses of grandeur, columns intricately carved with designs, ceilings vaulted high in a way that inspires wonder, stone floors laid so perfectly together that no mortar held them in place. They were rooms that were meant to awe, to show power and prosperity, to make guests feel tiny against something great. Yet time has worn that greatness away, substituting despair for pride. The columns are broken, the ceilings drip sunlight between holes in their fabric, the floors are strewn with trash from centuries of neglect. In other parts of the castle, its functional nature is laid bare. There are grist mills where grain was once ground, identifiable by the huge wheels that still rotate when water is diverted into them. There are foundries where metal was wrought, their forges cold but their anvils still standing ready for use. There are gardens, some open to the sky and some locked in glass houses, where plants have run wild in the lack of tending hands, developing jungles in miniature. There are kitchens with ovens great enough to roast whole animals, and storerooms with shelves which could supply provisions for armies. But most revealing perhaps are the rooms that appear to have no utilitarian function, the rooms that exist solely for beauty or for contemplation. A space in which sunlight flows through tinted glass, coloring the floor in rainbows. A courtyard with a fountain that is dry now, but whose basin is ornamented with statues of beasts that may be real or may be of legend. A balcony overlooking nothing but sea and sky, its railings fashioned with representations of ships and storms and far-off beaches. These rooms tell of a people who loved art, who constructed not only for endurance but for delight, who desired their home to be a magic place. And yet, in spite of all this proof of life and society, the castle stands unoccupied. There are no corpses, no struggle marks or abrupt exit. Whatever became of the people who constructed this site and dwelled inside it, it was so long ago that even their ghosts have vanished. Only the darkness lingers, and they are not remembrances of the builders but of the victims, of the horned children offered up over the centuries. The lack of life in the castle leaves a strange feeling, one that swings between the creepy and the tranquil. The sound design reinforces this sense of emptiness. No music plays during most of the trip, just ambient noises, wind howling through shattered windows, waves crashing against the far-off rocks, the creak of old wood and the groan of shifting stone. Iko's footsteps resonate throughout empty chambers. Jorda's dress rustles as she walks, and when the shadows appear, their arrival is heralded by a sudden surge of discordant music, all the more terrifying for how it breaks the silence. The lighting is equally important to the castle's character. Director Fumito Ueda used a method known as bloom lighting, where areas of brightness on purpose overexpose, bleeding into darker areas and producing a soft, near-dreamlike effect to the visuals. It is both an aesthetic and a practical choice. Aesthetically, it makes the castle feel ethereal, as if it exists suspended between the world and another. Practically, it points players in the direction of interest, since brightest areas naturally attract attention and tend to point the way where Iko and Jorda should head next. The castle also shows what Ueda termed as design by subtraction, an approach of subtracting all that doesn't contribute to the main experience. No HUD overwhelms the screen, no health bars or stamina indicators or minimap. The sole accommodation to game interface is a gentle prompt at points of action availability, and even those are slight and unobtrusive. The castle itself has to tell players what they must know through its architecture, through the arrangement and lighting of spaces, through the presence or absence of interactive objects. This method results in a level of immersion that few games attain. When you navigate the castle, you are not a gamer playing a character on a video screen. You are Iko, small and weak, in a building too big to grasp, struggling desperately to escape while keeping someone weaker than you safe. The castle is a problem to be solved, a map to be mastered, a realm which slowly shifts from unfriendly labyrinth to comfortable land to move its halls back and forth. But the castle is not merely a backdrop. It's also a prison for a reason, although that reason only reveals itself as Iko and Iorda approach what they think is freedom. The Queen's first encounter. The path towards the main gate of the castle is long and tiring. Iko and Iorda navigate courtyards and rooms, unravel mysteries of cooperation and patience, battle waves of shadows that neither increase nor decrease in number but hold a steady threat. The gate itself is a huge thing, 2 doors of old weathered wood hinged with black iron, standing at the end of a long causeway that stretches off into the land from the castle. It is the only patently visible exit, the only road that does not terminate in ocean or cliff. It is, quite literally, hope made flesh. But the gate is locked, and to open it one must trigger mechanisms found throughout the castle. 4 hours, Iko and Iorda labor toward this end, pulling levers, redirecting water flow, ascending towers and diving into depths, all in order to get these ancient mechanisms working one last time. And at last, after what has been an eternity of striving, the mechanisms catch. Gears grind, weights drop, and with the rumble of thunder, the massive gates start to open. Iko and Iorda sprint towards the opening, hands locked, hearts pounding at the chance that this horror would truly cease. The causeway outside the gate is a thin line, a bridge along an enormous canyon with sea foaming far beneath. But it is a road from this place, and that is all that counts. They walk through the gate, leaving the castle for the first time, tasting air with a tang of salt and freedom. And suddenly a voice calls out. It is a woman's voice, deep and sonorous, and full of an authority that will not be questioned. Both languages are spoken by the voice, first to Iorda in the foreign runic language, then to Iko in his own words, so that each of the children gets exactly what is being told. The message is straightforward and ghastly. Iorda cannot escape. She has to stay in the castle. And Iko, if he wants to live, should quit now and leave this stupid quest behind. The owner of the voice appears before them, emerging from shadows and light, taking on a form that is at once beautiful and terrifying. She stands tall above the 2 children, her form clad in darkness that ripples and flows like living fabric. Her face is white, almost colorless, with features that were perhaps once human, but have been honed by age or sorcery into something else. Her eyes are gray and hard, depths that Iko cannot begin to understand. And on her head is a crown, or possibly horns, made of the same darkness that drapes her about, points of shadow that stretch towards the heavens like accusations. This is the queen, the mistress of the castle, the weaver of the curse that has taken so many horned children. And she is Iorda's mother. The discovery is conveyed not by exposition, but by the manner of the queen addressing Iorda, a tone that combines possession with something that may be warped affection. Iorda cowers before this woman, her posture betraying that this is a relationship born of fear, not love. The queen describes, in the slow cruelty of one who has already triumphed, that Iorda cannot live in the world. The girl is tied to the castle, to her mother, to a predestined fate that awaited her before her birth. She is not supposed to go out. She never was supposed to go out. ICO, still grasping Iorda's hand, will not listen to this. He does not say so out loud. He just stands there, a young boy in front of a being of great power, making it very clear by his continued presence that he is not leaving his friend. The queen looks at him with a mixture of amusement and irritation, as one would glance at an insect that will not be swatted. She does not see him as a threat. She does not see him as anything at all, actually. He is below her notice, a temporary nuisance that will pass. With a wave of her hand, the queen closes the gates. The great doors swing to with the permanence of a tomb closing over, blocking the way to freedom. And she is gone, dissolving again into mist and shadow, leaving ICO and Iorda on the causeway, their hope turned into despair. But ICO will not quit. He can't. He has traveled too far to now go back. If once the gates may be opened, then they can be opened again. There has to be another solution, another machine, another path out of this apparent impossibility. So he goes back, takes Iorda's hand again, and leads her into the castle to seek whatever secret will give them real escape. The queen transforms the character of the journey. Previously, the castle was merely an impediment, a labyrinth to be traversed. Now it is discovered to be an animate prison, kept up and dominated by an aware will that possesses designs of its own. The shadows are not indiscriminate visitations, but servants, minions dispatched to reclaim what the queen believes is hers. And Iorda, sweet and otherworldly Iorda, is not merely a captive, but a critical element in some nefarious scheme that the queen has been building towards for years or centuries. This changes everything. The horned children did not come to the castle simply to perish. They came as offering, as combustible, as raw material to whatever it is that the queen is attempting to build. And Iorda, imprisoned in her cage, was being kept, guarded and secluded until the moment to fulfill her role. That she was freed by ICO was not in the plan. That they could actually flee is something that never crossed the queen's mind. But now that it has become a real possibility, the queen must do more to prevent it from occurring. The travel goes on, but now with additional weight. ICO and Iorda are no longer merely attempting to escape. They are struggling against a creature of unparalleled power, a monster who holds sway over the very form they are attempting to escape. Each device they use may be a trap. Each path they walk may bring them further into harm's way instead of nearer to freedom. Trust becomes something they can no longer afford except for one another. And still they continue. They unravel new clues more difficult than before. They explore parts of the castle that are now accessible. They battle shadows that are more hostile, more insistent. And slowly, through experimenting and trying and dogged, obstinate determination, they discover what they seek. A means of opening the main gates permanently. To build a way that even the queen will not be able to seal too easily. The answer involves triggering mechanisms all around the castle. An elaborate system of counterweights and gears. An old technology that was meant to be controlled by a lot of individuals, but now it needs to be controlled by two kids in desperate synchrony. It is time-consuming. It is laborious. It is ICO exploring regions where Iorda will not be able to track him. Confiding that she will be safe once he is gone. Believing that the darkness will not take her as he labors. And at last, beyond hope, it is accomplished. The machinery is triggered. The gates start to open, and this time they will not close with ease. ICO goes back to Iorda, claims her hand, and hand in hand they flee once again towards the bridge, towards the causeway, towards freedom that once more appears within their grasp. But they are not quick enough. They never could have been quick enough. The bridge and the betrayal. The bridge is long, extending itself a thread between the castle and the faraway mainland. It is thin, not broad enough for two to walk abreast, with no barrier to stop a fall into the foamy waters so far beneath. But it is a journey, and that is all ICO and Iorda require. They walk as fast as Iorda's frailty permits. ICO in the lead, tugging at her hand, urging her forward with words she can't comprehend, but with tone that conveys everything. Hurry, we're nearly there. Don't quit now, just a bit more. They arrive at the middle of the bridge. The castle is behind them. The mainland stretches out before them. It seems within reach for an instant. They may really do it for an instant. And then the queen is there. She does not step forth out of darkness now. She is simply present, standing in the area in front of them as if she has been there all along, and the world is only catching up with a belated recognition of her presence. She stands bigger than before, or possibly they are witnessing her full size for the first time. Her shape looms over them, her shadow crossing over the bridge like a storm cloud, her presence so imposing that it is hard to breathe. She speaks, but not to ICO. Her whole attention is on Iorda, her daughter, her captive, her possession. And whatever she says makes Iorda flinch visibly, drawing back from ICO's hold, shuddering her head, denying something that ICO has no idea about, but can sense the substance of. The queen is not requesting. She is demanding. She is taking what she feels is rightfully hers. And then the queen follows through on her previous threat. She proves that Iorda cannot escape, and she does so in the most horrific manner possible. She petrifies her daughter. The change is sudden and total. One instant Iorda is a living girl, terror-stricken, yet still moving, still breathing, still alive. The next instant, she is a statue, her body set in the middle of a gesture, her face frozen in fear and resignation. The stone itself is as white as her gown, smooth and cold and completely lifeless. Where one stood, now there is only sculpture, a monument to failed escape. ICO screams out, stretching for her, but before he can touch her, the bridge itself betrays them. Portions of the causeway withdraw, sliding into the castle walls with mechanical ease, producing openings that cannot be leaped. The part of the path where ICO is standing leans, unsteady, and he loses his balance. He slides, scrambles to catch hold, finds no grip, and then he is falling, rolling through the air towards the sea a long way beneath. His final view before plunging into the water is of Iorda's statue form, still upright on the bridge, left behind and out of reach. The splash in the water should kill him. The plummet is huge, hundreds of feet easily, but somehow ICO lives. Maybe the sea is deep enough to break his fall. Maybe he is shielded by the same inexplicable luck that released him from his tomb. Maybe the tale just needs him to survive, and so he does. He breaks water, gasping, confused, salt scorching his throat. The current tugs at him, sweeping him from the castle, from Iorda, drawing him towards what could be safety, but is perceived as failure. He struggles against the current. He attempts to swim back to the castle, to the bridge, to the stone statue of the girl he vowed to defend. But the sea is more powerful than a child, and eventually he tires. ICO's eyesight fails, his limbs become numb, and awareness departs from him altogether, his body slumping in the water as the waves wash him wherever they might. When ICO regains consciousness, he finds himself having been left by the ocean in a location he never knew existed, a natural system of caves under the castle itself, open only from the sea, out of anyone's view who comes from the shore. There is a dock, ancient timber which somehow has not decayed despite perpetual exposure to the weather. There is a boat, little but fit to sail, obviously used by the masked men who deliver horn children to the castle. And there is a tunnel up, hewn out of the rock, climbing upwards into the bowels of the castle foundations. ICO drags himself out of the water, his wet clothes weighing him down, his body sore from the plunge. He is lucky to be alive. He is lucky to take the boat and leave, to escape, to save himself, to get away from this accursed land and never return. Iorda stands there, unmoving. The queen has triumphed. There is no use going on with this futile mission. But ICO does not board the boat. He does not run. Because somewhere in the castle above, Iorda is standing still. And even if she is statue, even if she cannot move, speak, or be saved, ICO cannot leave her behind. He promised, not with words but with action. With every hand that he took, with every time that he positioned himself between her and the shadows, he swore that they would escape together or that they would not escape at all. And so he ascends, up through the darkness of the secret passage, up through the secret recesses of the castle, up towards whatever the future holds for him. He has no weapon, no strategy, no hope, truly. But he possesses determination, and sometimes that is sufficient. The depths below. The way from the secret dock carries ICO through parts of the castle which he has never explored. Sections that were not intended for prisoners or guests, but for the operation and maintenance of the castle itself. These are the functional rooms, unadorned, constructed solely for the sake of function. There are conduits through which water passes to drive the mechanisms of the castle. There are rooms full of gears and levers, the mechanical core that enables the structure to function. There are tight crawl spaces and shafts, paths of climbing and cautious negotiation. The path is hard and confusing. In the absence of lights guiding, In the absence of Yorda to show the way through her possession of opening doors, ICO has to proceed by guesswork, by going where the path goes upward, by having faith that sooner or later he will be able to return to the castle proper. The shadows do not show up in these depths. Either they cannot appear here or they simply have no need to, as Yorda is trapped and ICO is already lost. The quiet is almost more atrocious than if their presence were here. But ICO does manage to make his way upwards into a section of the castle that he knows. He is in the western complex, in the arena where gladiators once may have fought for the amusement of the castle's ancient inhabitants. And there, on the floor as if intentionally left for him to discover, is a sword. This is not the coarse weapons ICO used before. This is something different, something that exudes power. It's a long, straight blade, shining with a light that appears to emanate from within the metal itself. The crossguard is elaborate, etched with glyphs that could be writing in some lost tongue. And when ICO takes it in his hand, the sword vibrates with power, coming to life at his touch as if it were breathing. This is the Queen's sword. Although ICO is unaware of it, it is a weapon made to serve a particular purpose. To combat the shadows, to drive away darkness, to kill the servants of the ruler of the castle. That it lies here now for ICO to find, indicates that the Queen has deliberately abandoned it. Perhaps she wishes to challenge him. Maybe she would like to know if a horned child with her own weapon can be a threat to her power. Maybe she simply doesn't care, believing that even if ICO has this sword, he cannot alter the course of this tale. But with this new sword, ICO's abilities are changed. The sword slices through shadows as effortlessly as air, sending them scattering with single blows, where previously it took many to repel them. More significant still, the sword can interact with the non-operational doors, the gates that had hitherto remained available only to Yorda. When inserted into the locking device, the blade carries with it the same energy that Yorda radiates, enabling ICO to open doors that were heretofore unavailable to him. This turns everything around. ICO no longer needs Yorda with him to get around the castle. He can now go where he couldn't before, can go down paths that would have put her at risk. He is, for the first time since releasing her, independent. And this independence takes him back through the castle, through corridors and rooms that he traveled through with Yorda. But now viewing them differently, coming to see them as being part of the greater good, and not simply as things to be worked around. The return trip back towards the throne room, the room where he initially regained consciousness in his tomb, takes hours. The castle, without Yorda to show him the way, to be there for company, to give meaning to his actions, feels emptier than ever. The silence is suffocating. The shadows, when present, are almost obligatory in their assault, as if they too realize that the true conflict is not with them. And at last ICO arrives at the Chamber of Tombs, the spiral chamber where his tale started. But now it is changed. The sarcophagi lie open, their lids cast off, their interior revealed. And out of those tombs come shadows, not the vague darkness that has haunted him around the castle. These shadows possess shape, possess definition, possess faces. They are the Horn Children. The Shadow Children. There are 53 of them. They are the same height as ICO, with the same little horns pushing out of their heads, with bodies that imply boys around his age. But they are constructed of shadow, their forms unsubstantial, their faces only faintly outlined. And they don't fight. They dance instead. They move in a circle around a focal point in the room, around something that ICO can't at first perceive. They move in unison with an otherworldly synchronism, as if executing some ritual, as if celebrating or grieving, or doing something entirely beyond human analogy. Some of them see ICO coming and walk over to him, but they don't come at him aggressively. They act confused, curious, as if they recognize something of him, but can't quite place what it is. As ICO passes through their ranks towards the center of their circle, they move aside to allow him passage. And in the area that they were guarding or worshipping, Yorda stands, still statue, still immobile, still left behind. At the sight, something cracks ICO. He has struggled so, suffered so, all to defend her, to rescue her, to fulfill his promise. And here she is now, within grasp, but changed into something he cannot help, cannot touch, cannot rescue. The horned shadows dance on around her, and ICO sees with horror what they are. They are not merely the ghosts of deceased children, they are the other victims, the other horned boys who preceded him, who perished in their tombs, or were instead made into servants of the Queen. They are what ICO would have been had his tomb not collapsed, had he not been awarded his inexplicable reprieve. And they now encircle Yorda, attracted to her for reasons ICO cannot comprehend. Are they guarding her? Are they attracted to her light even when she is petrified, or are they just bewildered, as lost dead as they were living, unable to grasp what has befallen them or why they still exist. Some of the shadows attempt to attack ICO, but half-heartedly, without believing the way that the other shadows believed. When he sweeps with the queen's sword at them, they flee easily, their bodies fragmenting and crawling back into the open sarcophagi, which then remain aglow for a moment before extinguishing themselves. It is not violence, not truly. It is mercy. It is freeing them from whatever force keeps them tied to this location so that they can rest at last. One by one, ICO dissipates the shadow children, battling when necessary, walking through them when he can. They don't appear to resent him. Some run away from him without being hit. Others just observe, their shining eyes following him, but doing nothing to obstruct his path. It is a sad and strange and deeply disturbing thing, this room of victims, this shrine to the castle's foul intent. And when the last shadow child has been sent forth, when the room is at last empty, save for ICO and Yorda's stone form, an opening appears. The last idol gate, the one to the throne room, opens up without ICO having to do anything, as if the scattering of the shadows was the password, the last condition to the heart of the castle. ICO glances back at Yorda's stone body, his hand extending as if to lay a finger upon her, then draws it back, unwilling to sense the chill of what is supposed to be warm skin. He turns and exits the gate, the queen's sword held in his hand, resolve in his heart, without any sort of plan of what he will do when he finally confronts the ruler of the castle. The throne room lies ahead. The last battle. The throne room is immense, its ceiling obscured in darkness, its walls hung with tapestries whose colors have faded to the point of illegibility. At the opposite end, raised on a dais climbed by a long staircase, rests an empty throne. It is a giant's chair hewn from a block of black stone, its high back rising like a towering fortress and ornamented with yet more of the eerie symbols that recur throughout the castle. And standing in front of the throne, waiting patiently as if she has nothing better to do, is the queen. She does not respond to ICO's arrival, she merely stands, her presence more corporeal now than when she first appeared on the bridge, more real, more tangible. The darkness that envelopes her changes and moves like a living entity. And in the darkness, ICO can sense glimmerings of something else, something immense and awful, that the darkness is both concealing and revealing. ICO climbs the stairs towards her, the sword grasped in both hands. He is fatigued, wounded, stretched to the limits of what any child should ever have to bear. But he climbs anyway, step by step carrying him closer and closer to the queen, step by step moving him farther and farther from any chance of escape. At halfway up the stairs, the queen finally utters words. She asks him why he carries on this hopeless endeavor. Yorda is stone, the fight is done, he can depart if he wants to. She won't prevent him from it, actually she urges it. Get the boat from the secret pier, set sail, live the life he can with his affliction. She doesn't care about him, never cared about any of the horned kids except as instruments for her end. He can go. But ICO does not look back. He keeps climbing, and something in his resolve seems to entertain the queen. She speaks, in the long-suffering cruelty of a teacher explaining to a rather slow pupil, why Yorda cannot ever escape the castle. The girl is not merely her daughter, she is a vessel, specially prepared over many years, made to be just so for the use the queen has planned. The queen is old, ancient to measure, her body weakening in spite of her magical strength. She requires a new vessel, and Yorda has been trained from infancy to offer it. The queen will move her consciousness, her soul, her essence into Yorda's body, claiming possession of her daughter's youth and vigor, prolonging her life for another generation, perhaps longer. This is why Yorda was imprisoned in the cage, separated and conserved. This is why the Horn children were summoned to the castle, their being somehow required by the right that will enable this transfer. This is why ICO needs to fail, because if Yorda gets free, the queen loses her sole opportunity for further existence. Having shown him all this, having bared her scheme with the assurance of a person who does not mind being known, the queen gives ICO one last opportunity. Leave the sword. Leave the castle. What? She does not wish to slay him unless she must. He is, after all, a boy, and there has been more than enough killing in this place already. But ICO's answer is not words. It is action. He darts up the last flight of stairs, the sword poised, and strikes at the queen with every ounce of strength that he has. The fight that ensues is short but fierce. The queen does not use weapons. She battles with magic, with tides of darkness emanating from her body, with teleportation and the power to appear anywhere inside the throne room. ICO dodges and attacks, finding weaknesses in her defense, learning the hard way where she is weak and where she is strong. The queen is protected by a shield, a field that pushes ICO's first wave of attacks away. The sword, however mighty, cannot pierce this defense with ease. But the throne room is equipped with pillars, ornamental columns to hold the ceiling up, and the pillars can act as shields against the queen's strikes. More importantly, the queen's magic can destroy these pillars, and when they break, sometimes they create holes in her barrier. It is a desperate battle, hasty and disorganized. ICO is no warrior. He has no skill, no technique, no poise. He merely swings the sword when he can, runs when he has to, and hopes that every blow carries him closer to winning, and gradually, against all hope, he starts to hit. The sword breaks through the queen's defense, touches her shape, makes her scream in what may be pain or what may be shock, but the queen resists. She attacks ICO with her magic, a straight blow of raw force, and sends him crashing across the throne room. He crashes into the wall, and when he attempts to stand up, he senses something is amiss. Agony bursts in his head, searing and pinpointed. He raises his hand and discovers that one of his horns is broken, sheared off at the base. Blood trickles down his cheek from the wound, hot and tacky, and for an instant ICO believes that he really will die here, that the queen's rebound has been fatal. But he does not die. The shattered horn is excruciatingly painful, but it is not a killing blow, and more crucially, it infuriates ICO. He has been sacrificed on the altar of these horns. He has been blessed, cursed, marked for death from the day he was born due to these horns. And now the queen has shattered one, and for some reason this desecration, this destruction of that which was emblematic of his suffering, renews him. He rises up, he picks up the sword, and he strikes once more. The queen, surprised ICO is still alive, perhaps finally comprehending that this boy is a real threat, loses her control. She unleashes everything she has, waves of darkness that engulf the throne room, magic so intense that it appears reality itself distorts under its power. But ICO does not give up. He dodges. He attacks. He will not quit. And at last he bursts through. The queen's defense crumbles, then collapses altogether. ICO pushes forward, the sword held high, and thrusts it once more into the form of the queen. The blade bites deep, penetrating whatever serves for her heart, and the queen stiffens, her gray eyes wide in what may be shock, maybe disbelief. She utters something, a last warning or curse, or perhaps just one of surprise that this has actually occurred. And then she screams. The voice is unnatural, a scream of anger and agony and denial that rings throughout the castle. The queen's body loses stability, the shadows that envelop her bursting outward in a blast of energy that strikes ICO and sends him crashing across the floor once again. This time, when he collides with the wall, his second horn is shattered, breaking off entirely. The agony is immense. His vision blanches and then darkens. And then he knows nothing whatsoever. The castles fall apart. When ICO does regain even partial consciousness, the first thing he is aware of is that the castle is disintegrating. The queen's death has caused some cataclysmic failure in the foundations of the structure, as if her magic was the only force preventing entropy. Walls crack and start to fall, ceilings collapse, floors split open, showing the chasms below. The whole building, centuries old or maybe even millennia old, is at last succumbing to time and rot altogether. ICO attempts to walk and cannot. His body is shattered in ways he does not even begin to comprehend. Both horns are missing and he has bleeding wounds there. His arms and legs are far away from him, unattached as if they belong to another person. He is on the floor of the throne room as stone falls from above, thinking in some far-off, detached corner of his mind that this is how it must end. He's made it through the tomb, through the sea, through the shadows, and even the queen herself, only to be killed by falling stone. But something impossible occurs. A form breaks out of the chaos, running through the imploding throne room with speed and intent. At first, ICO supposes it may be one of the shadows finally come to take him. But as the figure approaches, he sees the height, the stride, the general form. It is Yorda, but not the Yorda he knows. This Yorda is constructed of darkness, her body dark and intangible, her face hardly discernible in the shadows. The death of the queen has not released her from the stone. Rather, it has changed her into something different, something which can be in the area between life and death, between flesh and spirit. She is aware and sentient, but she is no longer human, at least not in any traditional way. Shadow Yorda moves toward ICO and, with a strength that is surprising, picks him up. Her arms, which are comprised of darkness, are firm enough to hold his weight. She bears him through the disintegrating throne room, through corridors that are crumbling all around them, down stairways that fall even as she goes down them. She walks with haste, yet with caution, as if she feared harming him more, this shattered boy who had worked so hard to keep her safe. They make their way down through the castle, going as straight a path as possible toward the concealed pier deep beneath them. Behind them, the building still continues to fall, each passing instant setting off new collapses, new perils. But Shadow Yorda makes her way through it all, at times becoming completely insubstantial to slip through things that would arrest anyone solid, then re-solidifying to stay in contact with ICO. They arrive at the dock. The boat remains, bobbing on the water, somehow unscathed by the devastation above. Shadow Yorda carefully positions ICO in the boat, positioning his unconscious form with what may be gentleness. She stands for a moment, gazing down at him, and while her face is hard to discern in its darkened state, there is something like sadness in her stance, something like regret. And then she thrusts the boat from the dock, pushing it out into open sea. The water catches it, sweeping it from the castle, from the falling building towards shelter and life. Shadow Yorda stands and watches the boat go for a very long moment. And then she speaks, one word in her own language, one word whose meaning is never known, but whose emotion is not in doubt. Goodbye. The castle keeps on falling. Shadow Yorda stands on the dock, neither trying to flee nor seemingly able to do so, unwilling perhaps, unable perhaps. She stands and watches until the boat has disappeared, until ICO is out of danger. And then the dock itself collapses, stone and wood plunging into the foaming water, and Shadow Yorda is swept down with it, breaking apart into mist and spray, reverting to whatever condition she was in before ICO set her free from the cage. The castle above disappears. The 4 islands that held it up collapse and slide beneath the ocean, dragging the whole structure down with them. Towers collapse, bridges break, courtyards and rooms and corridors, all of the areas through which ICO and Yorda moved together, all of the buildings that related histories of ancient civilizations, all of this is swept underwater. The devastation is absolute and total, as if the castle had simply been waiting for permission to abandon itself, and the death of the queen had given that permission. The storm that has threatened all day comes. Rain pours down in sheets. Lightning lights the landscape in fleeting, harsh flashes. But amidst all of this, the little boat floats on, its unconscious occupant borne away from the wreckage to a far-off shore, to some unknown future waiting for him. And then the tempest is gone, the rain ceases, the clouds open, and sunlight, golden and radiant, illuminates the water, the waves, the little boat, the boy in it. The beach in the end. ICO stirs slowly, awareness filtering back in pieces. He knows sun on his skin, heat after all that cold. He knows sand underneath him, rough and gritty. He knows the noise of waves, soft and rhythmic, so unlike the raging ocean that devoured him previously. And he knows pain, aching and persistent, from his head, where his horns once were. He opens his eyes to sky, blue and limitless and unblemished by castle spires or stone walls. He is free. He is alive. He ought to be thankful, relieved, joyful. But he feels only empty because he is alone. ICO slowly gets up, his body groaning in resistance. He is on a beach, a thin and rocky one, flanked by imposing cliffs. The boat that brought him here lies stranded near him, pulled up high by the tide. And way off in the distance, just visible beyond the mist, he can see the castle, or rather what is left of it. Just the tops of a few buildings still visible above the water level. And those are subsiding as he gazes, vanishing meter by meter, until only ruffled water is left. Yorda is lost, vanished in the destruction, returned to shadow and mist. He rescued her from the cage only to have her imprisoned in another way, and then to be lost completely when the castle was taken. His mission, his drive, his determination not to fail, all of it was for nothing in the end. She is lost and he is alone, and the horns that branded him are shattered, leaving him with only pain and blood, and the remembrance of what they stood for. Echo stands on unsteady legs and starts to walk away from the boat, along the beach, with no purpose or goal. What is he to do now? Go back to his village? They sent him to kill him. And he did not die. But can he return? Will they take him in? Will they even hear his tale of castles and darkness, and girls composed of light? Or will they simply notice the splintered horns and conclude that he is still cursed, still dangerous, still something to be feared and shunned? He walks, his head bowed, observing his feet leave prints in the soggy sand. And then he sees something in front of him, something white against the black rocks. At first he believes that it can be driftwood or seaweed or a trick of light. But as he approaches, the form becomes more visible, more defined, more impossible. It is a person, a girl, on the beach as if she drifted ashore, her white dress around her like wings. It is Yorda. Echoes runs. His tired body derives strength from some unknown place, his legs pumping forward in a staggered run. He reaches her and falls to his knees, not daring to touch her, fearing that she will be stone once more or shadow once more, or merely a creation of his desperate mind. But she is not hard. She is not figurative. She is human in a way that she was not when he last saw her. Her skin retains still that otherworldly whiteness, but now her cheeks have color, a delicate pink that implies blood pumping beneath. Her hair is still cropped and unkempt, but now it appears to be real hair instead of paint on porcelain. Her dress, though weathered by seawater and sand, is simply fabric, real stuff instead of something magical. She is irretrievably mundane, human, alive. But she is not going anywhere. She is not breathing, at least not in any manner that Echo can perceive. He looks at her, this girl he struggled so to save, this girl who gave herself up in order to save him, and feels his heart shatter with the realization that she lived through the destruction of the castle, only to die here, alone on this desolate beach so near to freedom. And then her fingers twitch. It is a tiny motion, almost imperceptible, just a slight curl to her hand, but it is movement, and where there is movement, there is life. Echo observes, barely even able to breathe as Yorda's eyes slowly, very slowly, open. They are the same odd color they always had been, but now they are shining, awake, present. She turns her head to Echo, a look of recognition dawning in her face, and she smiles. It is the first time ever that Echo has seen her smile. All through their entire trip together, through all the danger and fear and desperation of struggle, Yorda never smiled. But here now, reclining on this beach in the sun, having survived all the castle and the queen had sent their way, she smiles at Echo with heartfelt warmth and happiness. Yorda rises to sitting, slowly as if still frail but obviously recuperating. She takes in the view of the beach, the ocean, the sky above, beholding it all in wonder and perhaps relief. She is in the world outside, the world her mother told her would kill her, and she is not dead. She is alive and intact and unencumbered. She glances at Echo once more and extends her hand, the same one he extended to her when he set her free from the cage, a gesture of connection and friendship. And Echo, without hesitation, accepts it. Their hands entwine and they sit side by side on the beach, two youngsters who had made it through an impossible situation, who had battled a queen and triumphed, who had fled a jail that had imprisoned generations of victims. They say nothing. The language chasm is still there, and maybe it should be. Their comprehension of one another was never word-dependent to begin with. It was action, it was trust, it was the plain decision to assist somebody in need, it was the refusal to leave someone behind even if that would have been easier. The camera, which has watched them all along here, slowly withdraws from them as they sit on the beach together, little figures against the ocean and the sky. The castle's gone, visible now only as a ripple in the faraway water. The shadows are gone, cast loose or destroyed or perhaps no longer necessary. The queen is gone, her centuries-long rule brought to a close by a child with a blade, and ICO and Yorda are here, together, alive, free. The screen goes black, the credits roll, and ICO's story ends. Or does it? Because in the Japanese and European versions of the game, and in the HD remake, there's more. If you've played the game through once before and play again, a bonus cutscene pops up after the credits. ICO and Yorda are still on the shore, but now Yorda is walking around, poking around, inspecting everything with wonder. She discovers a watermelon that has washed up on the beach, picks it up and brings it to ICO. They sit down and enjoy it, each taking bites of the fruit in turn. The act so ordinary and so mundane that it seems almost miraculous after all that they have endured. Some see this scene as being real, an extension of the ending, evidence that Yorda actually did survive and that the two children will be alright. Others see it as a dream, ICO's mind creating a fantasy of tranquility as he floats in the boat, not yet awake, not yet realizing that Yorda didn't survive. Director Fumito Ueda has said that his own interpretation is that it's a dream, but that he left it intentionally ambiguous, so that players can decide for themselves how to interpret it. And that lack of clarity is appropriate for ICO, a game which never tells you anything, but has faith in its players to realize on their own, through experience, not exposition, that prefers questions to answers. In order to really get ICO, we have to move away from the game itself and look at how it was made, because the process of creation of the game is almost as fascinating as the game itself. ICO's creator is Fumito Ueda, a designer whose vision would go on to inspire a whole generation of developers and whose minimalist philosophy is in direct contrast to the more is more ethos which pervades much of the games industry. Ueda was not a gamer by background. He graduated in art, particularly abstract art, from Osaka University of Arts in 1993. His passion was for visual design and animation rather than for games. However, while he was still in school and shortly thereafter, he was introduced to some games that were borderline art and heavily narrative-focused. Games such as Another World and Flashback, which were European games that focused more on atmosphere and visual style than on conventional gameplay, deeply influenced him. After graduating from university, Ueda briefly worked at the company called Warp, where he produced graphics and animation for games like Enemy Zero under director Kenji Ino. The experience was tough as the company was faltering and deadlines were harsh, but it did teach Ueda some good lessons on how to make games and on the value of keeping a creative vision intact despite pressure. In 1997 he moved to Sony Computer Entertainment Japan, where he was offered the opportunity that would make his career, the chance to produce his own game. IKO started out as an idea instead of an actual game design. Ueda had wanted to make a boy meets girl story, a straightforward yet emotionally impactful one, centered around the fundamental mechanic of two characters holding hands. This was partially driven by his fascination with games that feature AI companions, but with one added twist. Most games at the time employed AI characters outside of the game world, instructing the player as if from a game designer, not the character under the player's control. Ueda wanted more, something more immersive, more integrated into the world itself. The hand-holding mechanic provided the groundwork upon which everything else was constructed. How would it work? What situations would need it? What would give it purpose as opposed to being a gimmick? These were questions that led to the construction of IKO and Yorda's relationship to the castle's design as an environment riddled with obstacles that necessitate teamwork, to the development of the shadows as an enemy specifically aimed at the AI companion. But Ueda's greatest contribution to game design philosophy was what he termed design by subtraction. This is his style, which would become his trademark, where everything that does not contribute directly to the experience is taken out. If it doesn't add to the game's themes, if it doesn't add to the mood or the emotional progression, it's taken out regardless of how much effort went into its development or how much conventionally it would be accepted within the genre. This ethos had some extreme choices. There would be no heads-up display obscuring the screen, no health bars or minimap or objective markers. There would be minimal talk, and that which was spoken would be in fictional languages in order to create an air of mystery. There would be no fiddly combat system, no leveling up, no inventory management. There would be no music except on certain occasions, most of the game having only ambient sound. Each aspect that was not part of the core experience was removed, leaving only what was needed. This philosophy was not popular across Sony. Executives and even a few members of Ueda's team questioned most of his choices. Why no HUD? How will the player know what to do? Why so limited combat? Won't the player get bored? Why the language barrier? Won't people just get frustrated? Ueda remained resolute, believing that these subtractions were warranted, that they made the experience more immersive and emotionally involving, exactly because they stripped away the usual video game aspects that would remind the player that they were playing a game. The development was arduous and took a long time. ICO was initially intended for the PlayStation 1, but after 2 years of production, the team reached hardware limitations that could not be surpassed without sacrificing Ueda's vision. It was decided to transition development to the PlayStation 2, itself still in production at that time. This involved beginning anew with new hardware, new systems, changing designs that had been developed for one platform to be used on another. The more powerful hardware of the PlayStation 2 enabled Ueda and his team to bring their vision to fruition to a greater extent. The bloom lighting effects that provide ICO's characteristic appearance were only achievable on the new machine. The seamless, large environments of the castle needed the greater processing power and memory. The animation system, which did keyframe animation instead of the more traditional motion capture, could be more expressive and detailed. The castle itself was built as a whole, coherent space. Unlike most games with separate levels connected through loading screens or generic transition spaces, ICO's castle was a continuous, interconnected space. You might be in one place and look down and see other places you had been or would go to later, which made for a kind of place that was not typical in games then. This demanded meticulous planning and amazing technical prowess, since the whole castle had to coexist in memory at one time in order to permit these extended sight lines. When character animation is given special consideration, ICO and Yorda both walk like actual children, with all their awkwardness and grace that entails. ICO's sprint is not the fluid dash of an action hero, but the stumbling jog of a weary and frightened child, still driven. Yorda walks in a delicacy that mirrors her prolonged incarceration, her movements tentative, her posture implying weakness. Even the manner in which ICO wields various weapons alters his animation. A wooden plank is carried differently from a sword, altering his balance and movement. The voice acting was sparse but important. ICO was voiced by Kazuhiro Shinch, Yorda by Riko Takahashi, and the Queen by Miso Watanabe. All of the actors brought subtlety and feeling to their small lines, selling the emotional truth of these characters, even though the players could hardly ever decipher what they were actually saying. The game took around 4 years to make, an age in game development speak, particularly for a title that was not a big brand or supported by considerable marketing. Sony's backing was instrumental, as a smaller publisher could have axed the project, or insisted on changes that would have undermined Yorda's vision. When ICO actually came out in December 2001 in Japan, and September of 2001 in North America, it was a commercial flop, selling poorly when compared to the blockbuster releases of the era. But critical acclaim was a different story altogether. Criticism lauded the artistry of the game, its emotionally resonant storytelling, its original take on game design. It was given many awards and was oft quoted in debates regarding the art of games. It became a cult favorite, cherished by those who experienced it, inspiring developers who recognized in it a new way of thinking about the potential of games. Years afterwards, ICO would be re-released for the PlayStation 3 as part of the ICO and Shadow of the Colossus collection, allowing the game to be discovered by a new generation of gamers in high definition. This cut was taken from the European release, adding features such as a 2-player cooperative mode in which a second player would be able to take on Yorda. The HD remaster made Ueda's vision accessible to more people, solidifying ICO's place within the history of gaming visual and audio design. ICO's visual language is unique and instantly recognizable. The game uses a palette that is both muted and colorful, with stone grays and weathered browns covering the majority of scenes, accented by the shiny whites of Yorda's dress and the bright greens of the occasional spots where vegetation has managed to gain a foothold. The bloom lighting, already mentioned, bathes everything in a soft, almost dreamlike glow, as if the entire castle exists in that perfect moment just before sunset when light becomes something magical. This lighting serves multiple purposes. Aesthetically, it provides an atmosphere that is sad but not suffocating, isolated but not necessarily desperate. Pragmatically, it directs the player to places of interest, since the brightest areas naturally catch the eye and generally represent where the player is able to make progress. Emotionally, it serves to underscore the theme of light and darkness throughout the game, with Yorda herself a figure of light in both literal and symbolic terms. The camera in ICO is also crucial to the visual presentation. Contrary to most third-person games which have a tight camera following the player character and offer manual camera rotation, ICO's camera remains mostly stationary, placed to reveal whole rooms or spaces instead of having it zoom in closely on ICO. What this accomplishes is a sense of scale, highlighting how tiny ICO and Yorda are in relation to the enormous spaces they move through. It also implies that the players are constantly mindful of the world as a whole, can spot threats coming from all directions, can lay out routes in advance before committing to them. This fixed camera method has its downsides, sure. There are times when the camera position makes exact jumping tricky, or when significant elements are hidden partially, but these annoyances are more than balanced by the advantages of the system, and most gamers find they learn to live with the camera system and enjoy the way in which it composes shots cinematically. The sound design is equally spare and equally brilliant. For the majority of the game, no music is played, only ambient noise, the wind blowing through shattered windows, waves crashing on rocks, seabirds crying in the distance, the sound of footsteps on stone echoing back, the sound of creaking old wood under pressure. These noises give the castle a sense of emptiness and age, a sense that the castle is an actual place with history, not a video game map. Music occurs only in certain instances, when the shadows strike, when key story points happen, at the climactic battle. Its intermittent nature makes the music all the more effective when it is heard. The theme of the shadows is dissonant and militant, boasting jarring strings and thumping percussion, creating a sense of instant tension and warning of danger. The conclusion theme, "You Were There," is gentle and somber, with a female singer singing in an invented language, expressing the bittersweet feeling of the game's finale. The sound effects themselves are well crafted so that they offer feedback without intrusiveness. The swing of a weapon carries weight, making a gratifying sound when it strikes a shadow. Yorda's footstep is softer than ICO's, further emphasizing her weakness. The opening of unused doors is preceded by a rising tone which implies something mystical occurring, obstruction removed. Even the sounds of the menu, the humble confirmations and rejections, are soft and discreet, keeping players in the world, rather than continually reminded that they are playing a game. Voice acting, as stated, is sparse. ICO only talks when he is summoning Yorda, his voice being one of concern or haste. Yorda vocalizes when attempting to speak to ICO, the tone sad and soft, sometimes pointing at objects or gesturing in a direction. The queen speaks rarely, her voice deep and authoritative. This limitation in speech leads players to notice body language, to tone, to context. It makes communication more realistic, harder, more significant. The cumulative impact of these visual and audio decisions is to make the game more of an environment than a series of levels, more of a narrative than a series of tests. Each element serves to further Yorda's goal of a stripped-down, emotionally affecting experience. None of it exists simply because that's what games are. All has a purpose, and what is omitted is as significant as what is presented. The relationship with Shadow of the Colossus. No mention of ICO would be thorough unless it discussed the relationship with Shadow of the Colossus. Ueda's second title, appearing in 2005. Though ICO was initially released, Shadow of the Colossus is actually a prequel, set in the same world but in an earlier time frame as stated by Ueda himself. The link between the two titles is subtle, left somewhat up to player interpretation, but it adds interesting richness to the story of ICO. By the end of Shadow of the Colossus, its protagonist Wanda is changed. Wanda, having defeated 16 giant creatures in a last attempt to bring back to life a young woman named Mono, is taken over by Dormin, an ancient evil god whose power was divided among the Colossi. Lord Aemon, the original priest who had imprisoned Dormin, employs a magical sword to cleanse Wanda of most of Dormin's essence, returning him to infancy. But it is not entirely purged. The infant has horns, small growths on his head that identify him as being cursed, as containing a piece of Dormin's power inside himself. This baby is, according to the game's lore and Ueda's confirmation, the ancestor of ICO and all the other horned children. The curse that ICO's village fears may represent a genetic memory passed down through generations of the day when Dormin nearly returned to full power. What does this imply for the horned children themselves? What this implies for the horned children themselves is unclear, although the relationship between the horns, Dormin's corruption, and the shadow creatures implies that each of the children who are born with horns still has some connection to that ancient power, no matter how weak. The shadows and ICO seem to be linked to Dormin too. Just as the Colossi in Shadow of the Colossus were vessels that held pieces of Dormin's energy, the horned children brought to the castle appear to become vessels for the same forces once they die, becoming the shadow creatures that serve the queen. This would imply the queen is trying to reunify these fragmented essences, collecting what's left of Dormin's power, and applying it for her own ends, namely to become immortal by transferring her mind into Iorda, and possibly acquiring the built-up energy of all those killed children. Some fans speculate that the queen herself is Mono, the woman Wanda sacrificed everything to save. This would be a tragic irony. Wanda's desperate attempt to revive his love instead brought about the situation for her to become a monster centuries later, cursing his lineage in the process. Whether or not this theory is actually true is left ambiguous by Ueda intentionally, as he would rather have players create connections than affirm or deny them outright. The castle in ICO is possibly constructed on or close to the location of the shrine of worship in Shadow of the Colossus, where Wanda took Mono's corpse and entered into his deal with Dormin. Though this isn't ever strictly validated, some details tempt this equation. Design elements that recall the ancient shrine, the existence of the magic sword that looks similar to the ancient sword utilized to seal Dormin, and the common themes of prohibited magic and awful costs that link the two games. Whether these are intentional story connections or merely common design decisions is left deliberately open to interpretation. This interconnectedness lends extra tragedy to the tale of ICO when seen from the perspective of Shadow of the Colossus. The horned children are not only victims of superstition but victims of a cycle initiated many generations ago by a person attempting to rescue the one they loved. ICO's pain, the pain of all the horned children, goes back to Wanda's decision, to his unwillingness to accept that death is final, to his determination to pay any cost to restore Mono to life. But it also means that ICO's triumph over the queen is greater than it at first seems. In defeating her and fleeing from the castle, in living when all the others did not, ICO breaks the cycle. He is the first horned child in generations to survive past his fated sacrifice. And with the queen dead, the castle destroyed, and the shadow dissipated, maybe the curse is broken at last. Maybe children born from now on will not be horned, or if they are, their horns will not declare them cursed. This is all conjecture, of course. Ueda has never stated definitively what occurs after the conclusion of ICO, but it is possible that ICO and Yorda's tale is not merely one of two people who escape from a prison, but one of shattering a curse that had continued through 3 centuries, of putting an end to a cycle of sacrifice and death that was initiated in love and concluded in freedom. ICO is full of thematic substance and symbolic depth beneath its minimalist guise. Most obviously, it is a tale about friendship, about how human connection can be source of strength in the face of overwhelming adversity. ICO and Yorda don't speak, they don't share a background, they don't have the same abilities or limitations, but that doesn't really come into it because what they both decide to do, beyond anything else, is assist one another, not leave the other behind, to confront fear with the other person instead of alone. The hand-holding element, something that might have been a gameplay gimmick, turns out to be the tangible representation of the theme. Each time ICO takes Yorda's hand, he is choosing. He can run faster without her, escape many threats with greater ease by himself, but he chooses to remain, to guide, to defend. And Yorda decides to trust him, to obey him, to put her life into his hands even though she has no logical reason to think that this weird kid with horns can actually rescue her. This companion theme carries over into the gameplay as well. ICO has been called an escort mission, but that's derogatory in most games, implying boring babysitting of a stupid AI character. But ICO deconstructs this by taking the escort mission as the focus, by crafting Yorda's limitations as not annoying hurdles, but as ways for ICO to show care and resolve. Escorting Yorda over a gap is not a nuisance task, but an instance of bonding. Defending her from shadows is not boring combat, but a show of commitment. The game also touches on isolation and belonging. ICO is a misfit, branded as other by his horns, exiled to die since his village is afraid of him and not with him. Yorda is just as alone, locked up by her own mother, caged for years or maybe her whole life, with no one to talk to but the queen who is only concerned about having her as a tool. When they meet someone who is familiar with isolation, someone who knows the meaning of loneliness. Their friendship is strong simply because each one knows the other option. The castle itself serves as an emblem of decay and stagnation. It is a building that had contained a great civilization, but now remains vacant save for the dying and the dead. The queen holds on to it, refusing to release, desperate to prolong her life endlessly at any price. She embodies the very opposite of change and growth, the need to stay fixed in perpetuity, to never embrace conclusions. ICO and Yorda's odyssey through the castle and ultimate escape is an image of rejection of stagnation, the will to proceed even into an unknowing future rather than be jailed in a known prison. Light and darkness are straightforward symbolic concepts, with Yorda being equated with light and the shadows with darkness. But the game refuses this easy binary. Yorda's light is passive, gentle, more a thing that exists than something that she uses. The shadow's darkness is evil but also pitiful, having been turned from victim to servant and not anything intrinsically evil. Even the queen, who wraps herself in darkness, is driven by nothing so much as the very human need not to die and to live on. The shattered horns at the end of the game are symbolic too. His horns have defined him, branded him as cursed, driven his destiny throughout ICO's life. When they shatter in the final confrontation, it hurts and is freeing. He is released from the physical stigma that ostracized him, but at terrible cost. Breaking is sacrifice, transformation, the cost of survival. ICO isn't literally the same individual at the end as he is at the beginning, transformed by his experiences and by what he has had to suffer through. The open-ended, ambiguous conclusion, whether it is a dream or not, is indicative of Ueda's approach to storytelling in games. He doesn't want to dictate to players what they should think or feel. He desires to construct an experience and then allow players to interpret that experience for themselves. Is Yorda alive or dead? Did they survive or not? Will they be all right? The answers are less important than the questions themselves, less than the fact that players are concerned enough to wonder. Legacy and influence. ICO's impact on games cannot be overestimated. Despite not being a commercial success, the game proved that games did not have to be shallow in order to be minimalist, that atmosphere and feeling could sustain an experience even in the absence of deep mechanics or pyrotechnic action. That AI companions could be a game's soul and not a nuisance, that escort missions could be something more than tedium. Many developers have used ICO as an inspiration. Hidetaka Miyazaki, who developed Dark Souls, has stated that ICO opened his eyes to the potential of video games as a medium and that he was motivated to become a game designer because of it. The influence is evident in Dark Souls' world design, in how areas fold back in on themselves and offer glimpses of far-off locations, in the economical storytelling that relies on players to fill in the gaps from the environment. Journey, the highly praised 2012 title from Thatgama Company, obviously borrowed from ICO's methodology of companionship and silent storytelling. Journey's two-player collaboration with players who cannot speak except by way of musical chimes and gestures immediately references ICO's language deficiency and hand-holding. The Last of Us, more mechanically sophisticated and narrative-oriented than ICO, similarly examines the protector-protected dynamic, building emotional connection through the relationship between Joel and Ellie. The manner in which Ellie conducts herself during combat, remaining behind Joel instead of engaging beside him, overcoming puzzles that demand coordination, all resonate from design choices first made with ICO. Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons, Fez, Limbo, Inside, and a multitude of other indie games have borrowed ICO's design philosophy of subtraction, of minimalism in presentation, of placing faith in players to know without telling. The influence may be direct or indirect at times, but it is widespread across the industry. ICO has also been at the center of video game conversations as art. When critics and scholars insist that games are art, that they can be as evocative of emotion as examinations of theme, as movies or books, ICO is often cited. It shows up in museums, in art shows, in scholarly articles. It is deconstructed, it is analyzed, it is hailed not only as a quality game, but as a piece of art that just so happens to be a game. The game has been conserved through several means. Its PS3 HD remaster keeps it accessible to newer generations of gamers without requiring them to use retro machines. Fan sites keep wikis and walkthroughs, keeping information about the game's secrets and mysteries alive. Speedrunners have broken down its mechanics to figure out how to do it in less than 2 hours. Researchers have published papers on its themes and methods. But most crucial to ICO's legacy may be that it altered what was perceived to be possible by developers. Prior to ICO, the game industrial complex was of the opinion that games required certain things to succeed. Complicated combat, extensive playtime, plenty of dialogue and cutscenes, clear-cut goals and rewards. ICO defied all of these and thrived anyway, at least as an art piece if not a commercial success. It showed that you could create a game that was quiet, reflective, emotionally powerful and make it be compelling. That empowered other developers to try things, to attempt ideas that would otherwise have been rejected as being too risky or too uncommercial. Would Journey have been approved without ICO showing the way? Would Inside? Would any number of well-considered minimalist games that have gone on to become critical favorites? The straight line from ICO to today's indie scene is obvious, and the world of gaming is better off for it. Conclusion: the narrative of ICO is, at its simplest, straightforward. A lad saves a maid from a castle. They battle monsters, decipher puzzles and ultimately escape jointly. This description would not be inaccurate, but it would lack all the things that make ICO unique. All that has made it so timeless for nearly 2 decades. All that has inspired so many developers and touched so many players. Because ICO is not so much about what occurs. It's about how that makes you feel. It's about the feel of Yorda's hand grasped in yours, the manner in which that innocent tangible connection becomes a vow and an obligation. It is about fear when the shadows come and relief when you chase them away. It is about frustration with communication breakdowns and wonder when it works anyway. It is about loneliness in the castle and the security of friends. It is about stubbornness in the face of insurmountable obstacles and refusal to quit, even when quitting would be simpler. It's about being able to trust a game to lead you without holding your hand, except where it literally holds your hand. It's about learning instead of being told. It's about feeling instead of seeing. It's about being there in a moment, in a location, with a character, in a way that few other games have been able to do. Fumito Ueda made something truly special with ICO. He removed the limitations of the medium, the technologically limited, and the audience's expectation, and he removed everything that wasn't his vision. What was left was clean. A boy, a girl, a castle, and a love that no power, not even death, could sever. This is ICO's entire tale, but it is your tale too if you have played it, since Ueda's design ethos makes each player experience slightly, shaded by their own decisions, their own speed, their own feelings. Some will recall the holding back most forcefully. Others will recall the sun filtering through old windows. Others will remember the first time Yorda's eyes open on the beach, or when they fought so hard against the queen, or when they simply collapsed into a save point bench and could finally rest. Whatever your memory is of this game, whatever made this game meaningful to you personally, that is also what makes up ICO's story. Because ultimately, ICO is not so much a game produced by Fumito Ueda and his group at Sony. It's an experience shared between designer and player, a partnership in which the designers offer the structure and the players offer the feeling. And maybe that is the greatest thing about ICO. It is a game that trusts its players, respects its players, and ultimately rewards that trust and respect with something rare and precious. An experience that stays with you long after the credits roll, that influences how you think about games and stories and connection. A moment of beauty in a medium that often forgets to slow down and breathe. And if you like this dive into the full story of ICO, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are stories still to tell, games still to feature, adventures still to embark upon through the worlds developers have created for us. But for our purposes, we can just be glad that ICO is out there, that it has affected so many, and that it will keep inspiring and touching players as long as people play games. Thanks for watching, and until next time, may you always have someone to hold your hand when you most need it.